All right, so thank you, Ori, for the introduction. I'm going to talk about a topic that I'm passionate about. It's related to data governance. I'm going to discuss actually data governance and software development in conjunction. So I titled this presentation, Building Resilient Software, the Critical Role of Data Governance in Software Development. For those of you who don't know me or I haven't been introduced to in the past, I've done my dissertation, my doctoral research on the field of data governance, and I've gotten my computer science doctorate in big data analytics a couple of years ago. And I've been developing software, wearing various different hats over the last 20 plus years, from developer to architect to leader of developers. You name it, I've done about everything along the SDLC over that time span. I'm still heavily involved today in software development projects and leadership of teams and all. And I see these crucial components where data governance can be a big key benefactor to the delivery and organizational value. So I'm very passionate about it. So I decided it would be a topic that I would share with you all, and hopefully you guys can get some benefit out of it as well. So my goal here with this presentation is to raise awareness of data governance and how and where it applies into software development processes that we know. Understand the benefits beyond just compliance. I think a lot of times when they hear governance, they think we're doing it, or you think we're doing it because of just compliance, but there's more value both on the developer delivery processes, as well as organizational and business value than just compliance. I'm going to give you practical steps for integration into your SDLC processes and some things that you could be thinking about along the spectrum of your SDLC, regardless of the methodology that you use and work under. And then some next action plan steps that you can take back and consider. Where can you get started? How can you approach this and not be overwhelmed by it? Because just looking at data governance holistically, it's pretty broad and big and overarching, and it can be overwhelming if you're not currently doing it today, or you're not doing it in depth across your organizations or in your development processes. To get us started, to get to see the roles and everybody that's here, I have a little QR code and a survey. If you don't mind, I'll leave that up on the screen for a second. But I got a poll. I'll have two polls throughout. This first poll is just asking you what your role is currently today. So if you guys can hit that QR code and pull up the survey and answer the question that's there, we can get an idea of who we have. And there's looks like people are finding it, so we'll see. I'm going to choose mine, and then I'll give a couple more minutes.
Can you bring that up on the screen again, please?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. Got 7 responses so far. I'll wait for just a couple more. All right, we'll stop the poll and look at the results. And we'll do one more coming up in a little bit. All right, so what is your current job role? It looks like we got a few software development managers, mostly software developers, and then we have one other. And if that's Jason in the room being a recruiter, is that the other? Is there another role out there other than?
If I unmute our mic, is there lots of feedback or none?
Nope, I know feedback.
Oh, sweet. Okay, so if anybody laughs or says something, now you can.
Anybody want to fess up to what the other was? Was it recruiter?
Yeah, it was me, Todd.
Okay, all right, cool. I singled you out. There you go. All right, so we have no PMs or no quality assurance or business analysts, just developers, which I pretty much expected to be the case, but sometimes you never know. All right, so we know who we're dealing with here. So this quote, for some of us dated ourselves a little bit earlier in this before we started recording. So this individual, Tim Berners-Lee, we probably can resonate with. But a few years back or several years back, he said, data is a precious thing and will last longer than the systems themselves. For those of us who have worked on software systems and built software over the years, we can probably relate to this now, thinking back if our systems have been replaced by something newer or new versions or upgrades. The data that was captured or curated or used in those systems still exist in some fashion in many, many cases today. Is still used. So that data goes on and on for a very long time. And that's something that we have to consider as software developers. So the importance of data in software development is pretty much everything we build or create is going to do one or more of these three things that's on this slide, and any combination of the three as well. Captures new data, creates new data, requires data from various sources. When it comes to capturing new data, a lot of times we might be asking for users' input and to collect information that will contribute to the broader knowledge and organizational insights that we currently have today. When we create new data, even if you're building a game or some other application where you're not even collecting information from users, there is likely the case that in creating the new data, the software itself is going to collect logs or produce analytics or user activity records. So you may not actually have users inputting things, but you're still going to have data being curated or created by the application from a logging analytic perspective and user activity and user accounts even. And then there's requires data from various sources. With data from various sources, we in modern development quite frequently will leverage APIs and integrations from various different vendors, open source environments, or even obtain data or purchase data from other sources, both internally or externally. So it's pretty common that at some point in our software development process, we have data that is going to be a consideration for us that we need to be aware of, and we need to be ensuring that we're handling it properly and having proper processes to make sure that we do. So this concept of data governance, most of you have probably heard of by now. It's just a matter of how much does it actually impact the work that you do in the field, and how much do you actually take time to actually consider it, along with the maturity of the data governance methodologies that your organizations may use. Seems like from my experience is like it's all over the spectrum. Some companies are very mature in the processes. Other companies are very immature or just getting started. So if you're not familiar exactly what it is, because sometimes folks will get it confused with data management processes or relate to only certain elements of data governance. I know when I did my doctoral research back in 2020, 21 timeframe, the organizations that I surveyed, when I talked to them about data governance and what processes and policies and principles that they were applying, most of them talked about the critical component that I have there called around data security, privacy, compliance, and regulatory adherence along with access controls. That was what they related to the most. The other critical components they didn't really have a good grasp on or didn't even address in many cases. But what this is supposed to do for organizations is outline a strategic framework in identifying who's responsible for making the decisions about data and analytics and how to ensure that data is properly used. It specifically focuses on the policies, procedures, the standards that ensure the effective, secure management of the data. And most importantly, it's going to support the business objectives and goals that are going to be out there. And it will evolve over time too. It doesn't just get set up and put in place and be there forever. It has to evolve and change. So some of the other critical components, first and foremost, of course, are going to be those overarching policies and standards. The stewardship and the ownership. Data stewardship and ownership is always difficult and challenging for many organizations. First, people hear this concept of data steward. They don't know what it is in some aspects, or they think it's a job and they have to go hire for it in a specific role. In many cases, that's not true. Yes, there are jobs out there. We can look on job boards and we can find jobs that are titled data steward. But for most of us, data stewards is someone who I would see is a subject matter expert in the domain of where the data is coming from or where the data is being used. It already exists in your organization. They have stewardship responsibilities. They may not have all of the responsibilities or doing everything a data steward needs to do, or they're not aware of it all. But those are the folks that would be responsible for ensuring that the governance policies and standards are implemented for their areas properly throughout that entire data lifecycle. The data quality management is always important out there, ensuring that the organization has standards around the data quality, what's acceptable, not acceptable for use when it comes to scoring the data. The entire data lifecycle management, ensuring that that's fully considered from the time we take data in and from the time we actually destroy it or archive it. Data lineage and auditing, another important element to have governance around, knowing where the data came from, who it was touched by, how it was touched, how it was aggregated, or any other rules it went under to put it together before it got used. And then most importantly, having performance metrics and continuous improvement applied to the organization when it comes to their governance process. They're all key critical components.
Excuse me, Todd.
Sure.
Is it possible to make it full screen? It's kind of hard to read.
We can try.
Or hit like presentation mode. On the bottom right, it's got a little picture of like a movie screen. Nope, to the left of the Zoom meter. Yeah.
Does that make it better?
Yep, you just gotta turn off that thing that says turn on subtitles. Let's see if I can make this. Can I make it full screen? Display settings. Oh yeah, it's showing you it's showing the wrong screen. It's showing can you share the other screen? Just tell it to share your other screen.
Yeah, that's right.
That way you can still see your notes and we'll see it full screen.
Yeah, that's where it gets tricky. Let's see.
I've got old eyes.
How about that?
Perfect. Much better. Thank you, sir.
All right, we got it.
Everyone is saying thank you.
All right, sorry about that. Much better. All right, so we just finished off on this slide. So let's get to the next slide. There we go. All right, so the other concept here is data management. And the difference between data governance, which is the policies and procedures of the organization and the overarching framework, the data management is the operational pieces, the operational framework that's going to tell us how we handle and maintain a data throughout its life cycle, including the data collection, the storage, security, integration, and destruction. The critical components here is the data quality management, the data storage and infrastructure, the data security, data integration, data lifecycle management, data architecture and design, metadata management, data access and usage management, and data backup and recovery. And a little image to the side kind of shows you the entire data lifecycle from the creation there to the destruction. So when it comes to data management, we're really concerned about how on an individual given initiative, project, or development initiative that we're doing, how we're handling all of these critical components and making sure that they are actually handled and thought through, and we have an operational method for them without overlooking them. So how does governance differ from the management aspects? Governance sets the rules and guidelines for how data should be managed. Data management carries out the rules in practice. So some examples: data governance might establish policies for data access control, while data management implements those controls by setting permissions. Data governance ensures data integrity by enforcing data quality standards, while data management involves the day-to-day tasks of organizing and maintaining the data. So Gartner back in 2021 released this figure that poor data quality costs organizations an average of $12.9 million. Not quite sure exactly what size organizations this was related to, but I'm thinking that was mid-sized companies for the most part. And this is all too often true. If we think about software projects that we've worked on over the years, and even in current state today, where data quality has caused us delays, caused us questions, problems in the various aspects of the life cycle, and what we've had to do because of it. I consider, because data hasn't been fully looked at in the early stages from a prep standpoint, how often are we writing code, or is our code breaking unexpectedly because we find data values that were not expected from having data that hasn't been curated and then evaluated from a quality perspective and have a score that's acceptable. And we're always, like I said, always trying to address it without actually looking back at the root causes and why the poor data quality even exists in the organization. So if we can actually start looking at ways to chip away from this and save some of these costs, it could be very beneficial to the organization and to our processes and overall quality of the delivery. So as software developers, well, why do we actually care? From a data quality and accuracy perspective, high quality data being essential for software to function correctly, and proper data governance ensures that data remains reliable throughout its life cycle. When developers use inaccurate or inconsistent data, it leads to application errors, poor user experiences, and faulty business decisions, or excessive code that they have to write to handle it. From a security and compliance standpoint, which most of us have to deal with or we hear about regularly, we must handle data in ways that comply with privacy regulations like GDPR and CCPA, in addition to HIPAA. And also here in the States, we also have to be concerned about individual states and what their current data privacy laws and data security handling laws, as well as our own industries, depending upon the industries that we work under and the regulations that are there. So developers need to be concerned about it and be aware of what's going on. From an efficiency and scalability standpoint, well-managed data architectures enable applications to scale and perform optimally, preventing bottlenecks or system failures, especially critical as data volumes grow. I can always think back to systems when they've been developed, and you might do some performance testing early on. You potentially do a little bit of volume testing, but as the system ages, many times no one ever thought about that last couple stages in the data lifecycle of archival and deletion. So your databases, and if you guys think about projects you've worked on, and maybe we can talk about later on, the databases just continue to grow. The data just grows and grows and grows, and the system will eventually, become a bottleneck, slowly perform, and then it becomes, get DBAs involved or get developers involved, and we start troubleshooting it, maybe improving some of the indexes and queries at times. But in reality, we just never really planned for years and years of data to be there in the first place. And Not only is that a problem from a system performance perspective, but also from a legal and compliance standpoint, because in some types of regulated industries, you're only required to maintain different types of data for a certain period of time. By maintaining it longer than you need to, should you have an audit or a legal issue and such, that information could be subpoenaed and you may have to turn it over. And if it's on your systems, you have to provide it. Now, if that was data that you no longer need to keep on your system of record and should be deleted, you avoid that risk. So you need to be considerate about the long term of keeping that data as the volume grows. Collaboration and consistency. In large teams, inconsistent data definitions and usage can lead to misunderstandings and software bugs. Data governance ensures that all developers and stakeholders use the same terminology and standards, improving collaboration and reducing errors. This is something that is beneficial over time as data governance evolves in an organization, and having solid metadata available and agreed upon terms across areas of an organization about what the data actually means versus questioning it and getting three interpretations of the same element, which is a very common problem that companies have. Different groups or different silos will interpret the same piece of data very differently, which causes confusion in our understanding. So large software teams or teams across different business groups will struggle with this. The last one, improved decision making. Software often drives business decisions through analytics and reporting. If developers are aware of and implement strong data governance, they can ensure that the insights generated are based on accurate, complete, and trusted data. A big problem we have a lot of times is we don't know, or we haven't thought through or questioned how the data that our system's generating and collecting and producing or changing or bringing together is being used, or what's the intended purposes. We might have requirements that we're trying to fulfill, and maybe these are requirements to just get the system up and running many times, but we don't really know what the end goal is. And we may not have involved all the right people that may end up leveraging and using that data in the process of software development. So the software developers, they don't have a clear picture of the broader implications of how this might be utilized in the future. So just not beneficial from just a compliance standpoint. There's actual business value here as well. This will improve our software quality by enforcing consistent data standards, ensuring accuracy. Data governance will help reduce errors and bugs in software, leading to more reliable system. It enhances the user trust. The strong governance ensures that user data is handled securely and responsibly, building trust in your software and brand. And this is really crucial in today's privacy conscious environment. It's also crucial to the folks that you're creating the software for and building the software for, because they're going to have a stronger trust in what you're producing, knowing that you've gone through these steps, and it doesn't leave a lot for questioning and ambiguity. So they know that the processes are there. You've involved them in the discovery in more depth and detail, and they're not left to ask those questions later on, maybe at times way too late in the game. Reduces long-term maintenance costs. Proper data governance reduces data silos and inconsistencies, streamlining operations, lowers the time and cost associated with maintaining and updating software, and makes debugging and system scaling easier. From a linkage to business goals perspective, it can improve customer satisfaction, ensuring that data quality and privacy fosters trust, leads to a better customer experience and increased loyalty. And again, that can be internally amongst your users of your systems or externally from your customers, depending upon the type of business that you're operating and the type of software you're creating. Operational efficiencies. Well-governed data reduces redundancies and streamlines processes, allowing teams to work more efficiently and make better, faster decisions. Also can give a competitive advantage. Having reliable, secure, and well-managed data supports innovation and enables faster adoption to market changes or adaptation to market changes, and giving the organizations a competitive edge. If you look at, you mentioned AI a little bit earlier, potentially as a topic for your next month developer meetup. If you look at AI projects over the last couple of years, look at many of the reasons for failure, and the research is showing us that is because of not having good data governance processes and controls in place around the data that's needed to be AI enabled. So if your systems have taken these data governance practices and principles into play, when you go and leverage AI on upcoming projects and work, you're going to be able to do so much better, and then that's going to help produce a better competitive advantage long term. So ultimately, as developers, by caring about data governance, it helps you create more secure, reliable, and scalable applications while reducing risks associated with poor data management practices. All right, we're going to do another survey real quick. I'm going to have to go back to that code in case you guys lost it. So let me pull this back up. There. And all right, I just opened a poll, so if you guys can check it out, asking how well does your current software development processes incorporate data governance practices? So far, we got 5. We got 6 responses. We'll get a few more, and we'll pull up the results real quick. Give you guys a couple more minutes.
Oh, someone's on their phone. Can you copy and paste the link to that poll into the chat, please?
Yeah, we can do that somehow.
Yep. And like Jason mentioned, if you have the poll from before, it's the same thing. So you can go back in there.
There's the session ID. The link is going to be slash.
He's typing it in. There it is.
There you go. Sorry.
Thanks, Todd.
Didn't have it readily. I had a screen print. I'll give you guys another minute to see if anyone else gets a response. All right, we got 7 responses, so we'll go with that for now. We could talk more about it during the open discussion. So let me get back to. All right. So interesting. We see responses across the spectrum. One person's not sure. And then we see a couple indicated fully integrated. somewhat integrated, and then minimal integration. So when we do the open discussion at the end, I'd like to learn more from the folks that are here, especially with the ones that are fully integrated. I'd like to hear what they've done and to understand how they've approached it and see if anything that I share is similar. And then the same with somewhat and minimum as well. And then the one that's not sure, maybe they can go back and find out. And those that you didn't answer, you guys can give some thought to it about where you fit on this spectrum. So how do we incorporate this into our SDLC, and what processes should we use to ensure governance is there? So at the first stage, we have stakeholder identification. With any software development initiative project, we always will have like a scoping inception stage. What are we setting out to accomplish? Identifying the project. First question we should ask to ourselves is, are we going to touch, capture, or create any new data? Most likely, almost all the time, thinking back to that slide I shared earlier, there's going to be some data element there, right? And once we've considered the data elements and aspects, we can then go down deeper into finding out who owns or will own that data. And we want to make sure they're stakeholders to our project. Okay, this can be several different areas at times. If you're working on a very large system replacement that might cross over several departments, you have several new stakeholders that you didn't even think about in the beginning if you're not considering how data impacts them. From those stakeholders, we need to understand how their areas and how they're responsible for stewarding the data today, and what rules we need to consider as part of our planning and development processes. We're going to want to review requirements along the way with our stakeholders and even our high-level requirements to ensure that our development will address what their needs are and their concerns. The stakeholder identification, we want to identify as early on in the process as possible, but depending upon the methodologies and depending on the depth and our maturity of our process in the organization, this could occur at later stages. It may occur during requirements. It may span into design and development, and even when it gets to the quality assurance processes. And that sometimes, because our processor may not be that mature, it's not until after we've implemented it. But the sooner we can do it, the better, so that we don't have the questions and the gaps that we have to overcome later on. So in the requirements stage, data governance will help to align the software requirements with policies and standards of the organization that exists today. Identify the data sources, the formats, the quality criteria the software must adhere to. Helps ensure that the software requirements are consistent, clear, and traceable. Ensures that the data security, privacy, compliance risks, and regulations are accounted for and that the software must comply with. So this is us figuring out what has to be created. Because if it's not defined here in the requirements, the software development team is going to come back and say, well, it's not our fault. You can't make the assumptions that we are supposed to know these things. We're not experts in the domain areas. It wasn't in the requirements. So they'll use the fact that it wasn't in the requirements as their scapegoat for avoiding compliance, security, governance elements at times if it's not clearly called out, or if your processes aren't mature enough, or your teams aren't educated enough around the importance of this and why data governance is important to even question it. They'll go forward, complete the software development, and perhaps another stage along the way will capture it if the requirements don't have it. In the design aspects, where software architecture and components are being planned for and designed, this will help us guide the software design decisions based on the data principles and best practices that should exist for the organization. It'll ensure that the software design supports the data quality, security, privacy, and compliance goals and requirements. It'll help to facilitate the communication and collaboration amongst the software designers, the developers, the testers, and the stakeholders to the data. Establish the roles and responsibilities for data management and stewardship throughout the software development lifecycle. I see many times when data is part of a project or software development and the data management practices and processes that you'd expect to be in place because data management practices have been a bigger component of organizations for much longer than data governance has, and yet those will even get skipped over. So that management around the processes of handling data throughout the life cycle, they're not always accounted for, and they're not always thought about until after the fact along the way. So if we do it here, we'll catch it in the software design phase and make sure they are accounted for. During the development process, where the code is going to be written and unit tested, we have some processes in place, hopefully already today, where this can tie into. We have secure coding practices. Hopefully, we have secure coding practices and processes that we're adhering to. Of those, we should expect to see that our data is securely managed, stored, and transmitted already. We already have aspects of data migration and transformation occurring as well. So we can ensure the data is moved or transformed, maintains its integrity. We should be doing those things. With data quality, we should ensure the quality and questions are raised and considered during that process. And logging and automating, we should be doing as well to implement mechanisms to track data access and modifications. Those are elements that are pretty standard nowadays. If you're not doing them, you should really be giving thought to those. But in addition to that, having data governance aspects considered, we're enforcing the policies and standards are there in our software code. We're ensuring the software code follows the quality, security, privacy, and compliance rules and guidelines, and it helps to monitor and measure the data quality, security, privacy, and compliance performance and issues of the software code to provide feedback and recommendations for improvement. We help to enable the reuse and sharing of data assets and code components across different software projects and teams. When we get to the testing aspects, where we're seeing if the functionality, the performance, the reliability are verified and validated, we're going to use data governance to help us implement the data testing strategy, plans, and scenarios. As we're creating our test plans, we're going to consider what governance aspects need to be considered there. Ensure that the software meets the data quality, security, privacy, and compliance expectations and requirements. We're going to help to provide and maintain the data testing environments, tools, and data sets that support the software testing activities and outcomes. And we're going to help to analyze and report the data testing results and issues and to ensure that they are resolved and documented. When we do the implementation, we're going to help to coordinate and execute the data deployment processes, procedures, and tasks that ensure that the software is deployed smoothly and successfully. Help to ensure that the software is integrated and aligned with the existing data systems, processes, and workflows of the organization, and that it does not compromise the data quality, security, privacy, and compliance of the organization. We're going to help to support and manage the data migration, backup and recovery activities, and plans that are associated with the software deployment. All of this will help lead us to a smoother rollout in phase where the software and during this phase where the software gets released to our end users and customers. We'll basically have all the operational processes accounted for and thought for that needs to ensure that this data is being properly managed and then governed long term. During the maintenance phases, where the software gets monitored, updated, and improved based on feedback, and depending on your organizations, this is what's going to help to maintain and enhance the data quality, security, privacy, and compliance of the software long term. It'll ensure that the software complies with the evolving data policies and standards of the organization. It helps to identify and address the data issues, errors, and incidents that affect the software functionality, performance, and reliability, and then helps to conduct and support the data audits and reviews that evaluate and measure the data value, impact, and risk of the software. So what do we do? Next steps. How do we start all of this? One of the first things that's always critical is starting to improve on processes and to see how it can benefit us in the organization is to get a current state assessment. Where are we today? So I asked you guys on that survey a little bit ago to evaluate yourselves, just in general speaking. What an organization needs to do is be honest about it. Be upfront, be concise, and consider where you are on a spectrum. Taking that into consideration, you're able to then see where you need to evolve and grow and to mature in your processes. So, you may not be at a 0, but you may not also be at a perfect score of doing it throughout. But you might be somewhere, starting out along the way. Some projects may be better than others, or some situations better than others, and that you can kind of see where you need to do better. From that, you can do that gap identification and look for opportunities, pinpoint those areas where quality, security, compliance could be improved. Where is it being done well? Where is it not being done so well? Where is it possibly to overall improve it? Put another one in here that's always important is to ensure that we train and upskill our teams and our resources across the organization, not just those directly involved in the software development lifecycle. I've seen Agile get rolled out this way, where you train just your software development teams and you forget to train your business areas on the concepts, and Agile fails pretty quickly. No different here is you can certainly train development teams across the spectrum of their roles that we talked about early on, from software developers to business analysts to quality assurance testers, put it as part of project management toll gates and all. But you also need your business stakeholders to understand the importance of this, why it's necessary, why they're stakeholders, why they're being involved on project decisions and project aspects that they haven't been in the past. So we have to look at ways we can train them. Could be workshops, could be certification, online courses, and just overall general education around these skill sets across the teams, the broader teams and organization, to ensure that this stuff doesn't get missed or forgotten about. I always hesitate with quick wins and prioritizing immediate actions, but in the corporate world, it's always going to be critical. Without any quick wins, any things that we can show as how we're moving the needle and how we're improving scorecards and going forward on. Without doing that, we tend to end up losing momentum, losing engagement, losing our stakeholders, and all. From a software development set of processes, one of the areas for quick wins I always see is if you have current maintenance processes for any of your software. In some organizations, you might have a monthly maintenance release process where a lot of your systems are maintained by a maintenance team and they undergo monthly maintenance releases. Well, those are usually quick initiatives. There's not a lot of requirements. There's not a lot of feature sets or user stories that are going to be delivered in those sprints or in those release cycles. So what you can do is use those as your test in your pilot areas to start implementing the data governance processes into what they're doing. Much easier on smaller initiatives than it is on larger initiatives to get going with. So this might be some of the places to look for those quick wins. The larger initiatives certainly can apply it there, but those larger initiatives tend to take several months before you have a delivery, maybe a year, sometimes more. Sometimes projects will span a couple of years. You don't want to wait that long to say, okay, well, look, we've implemented data governance processes and strong data management processes on this system we just rolled out, because that could take several months before that happens. So if you look at something that has shorter delivery cycles, you can certainly have these immediate actions and show these quick wins and stories, and then socialize that to broader teams in your organization. Engaging of the key stakeholders. This is very important. This is something that you have to explain to them, explain to why their teams are necessary, why they have to be involved on something that they didn't think that they were going to be involved in, or they weren't planning on being involved in, why it matters to them. They have to see where they may use the information themselves to help with their business in their areas long term. So they need to be part of the key processes that are out there and have their input along the way. So that'll be important too. And then lastly here, having clear milestones, right? We can't just throw this out there, say we're going to do it, expect it to get done, and everybody just start doing it and have it in place, and everything's great. It doesn't typically work that way. We have to have milestones, kind of a roadmap on how we would roll these processes in and improve these processes over time, and show those milestones being accomplished and the progress towards those milestones organizationally, so that we can have the continuous improvement, take in change as data governance processes need to change, as the environmental factors outside in the compliance world and space are changing. We have to be able to take in the change and as well. So those milestones need to account for that. And also we have to be able to, again, expect that this gets rolled out in areas over time and not just all at once. So at this point, I was going to roll to an open discussion, get input from the group, those that answered the survey at different various elements, and see what you guys think on this. So,
And I'll go ahead and stop the recording.
Yep.
To protect the innocent. As far as you know, the recording's stopping.